Camille Okafor was 32 years old and a senior account manager at a marketing agency in Atlanta. She had spent 4 years building a flawless record, 0 lost accounts, 3 major new clients, and a direct confirmation from her manager that a promotion was coming within the next 6 weeks. Within 72 hours of a single complaint being filed, she was removed. The complaint hit on a Tuesday, the HR meeting happened Wednesday, administrative leave began Thursday. By Friday morning, her access to the building was denied. The formal allegations were severe: creating a hostile work environment, using demeaning language toward junior staff, and taking credit for work she hadn't performed. None of it was true. Despite her 4-year track record, the internal process relied entirely on the claims in that single document. Without a hearing or an investigation, a senior employee was effectively erased from her position in a single workweek. During the initial meeting, Camille expected a neutral inquiry, but she was sitting across from people whose salaries were paid by the same organization that was now treating her as a potential liability. In a corporate structure, HR's primary function is the mitigation of risk for the employer. Their goal is to contain a situation and prevent legal exposure, which often places their interests in direct opposition to the employee being investigated. This is the mechanic behind paid administrative leave. By removing Camille from the office, the company cut off her access to her work email, her project logs, and her daily interactions with colleagues who could have served as witnesses in her defense. The investigation was not a search for the truth. It was a procedure designed to isolate the target, while the company determined the easiest way to resolve the conflict. Camille used her time on leave to reconstruct her history at the agency from home. She compiled every performance review and client thank you note she had saved over the years, building a paper trail the company couldn't delete. While reviewing her archives, she found a message from Priya, a colleague who had left the agency over a year prior. At the time, Priya had mentioned feeling pushed out, though she hadn't been able to explain exactly how it happened. Camille reached out with a question that skipped the small talk. "Did anyone file an HR complaint against you right before you left?" Priya responded in less than an hour. She had been hit with the exact same allegations: hostile environment and demeaning language. She had taken a small settlement and left rather than try to fight it. Camille spent the next 2 weeks contacting 6 other women who had held similar roles at the agency. These were women who had been recognized for their work and then suddenly resigned without a new job lined up. 6 of them responded. 5 of those 6 women confirmed they were targeted with nearly identical HR complaints in their final months, always using the same specific terminology about hostile environments. By talking to former employees, Camille turned her personal experience into a data set. What had looked like a one-time HR dispute was actually a documented sequence involving 7 different women over 3 years. Uncovering the sequence changed the legal requirements of the investigation. Camille's attorney now had evidence that this wasn't an isolated incident, but a recurring tactic used to stall the careers of women at the agency. They bypassed the agency's internal HR entirely and filed a formal complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. The EEOC has federal authority to subpoena records and investigate systemic workplace issues that an internal department might overlook. This timeline maps 7 identical complaints filed over 3 years, showing the agency ignored a clear pattern. This shifted the case into a systemic issue, providing legal grounds for federal intervention into their internal management. When the agency's executives were notified of the federal inquiry, they learned for the first time that the HR department had processed 7 identical complaints from the same source without ever flagging the coincidence. The agency's internal protocols were no longer the highest authority. The company was now forced to answer to an outside regulator with the power to examine their entire hiring and termination history. Camille did not wait for the HR investigation to conclude. She entered the executive boardroom with her attorney to meet with the CEO, bypassing the middle management that had initiated her leave. The leverage had shifted. The CEO and corporate counsel were presented with a timeline of events that their own internal systems had failed to catch or had chosen to ignore. Camille rejected the standard offer of a private settlement and a non-disclosure agreement. She made it clear that her goal was not a quiet exit, but a formal resolution through the EEOC's federal process. For 3 years, the internal reporting structure had failed to identify this pattern. The presence of federal oversight ensured that the agency's leadership had to address the breakdown in their own management. The result was a formal conciliation agreement. This is a legally binding contract between the company and the EEOC that mandates specific changes to how a business operates. The agreement forced the agency to hire a third-party firm to oversee all internal HR investigations for the next 3 years, ensuring that future complaints would be evaluated by an objective party. The company also paid a total of $450,000 in damages, which was distributed among the women who had been pushed out by the false complaints. The employee who had filed all 7 complaints resigned shortly before the federal investigation was finalized. Her departure was listed as voluntary, but it coincided with the first time her history of filings was made visible to executive leadership. Start making phone calls. Predatory systems rely on the assumption that their targets will never talk to each other. Those systems begin to fail the moment people realize they aren't dealing with a personal problem, but a shared pattern.